All right. So this will be the second ghost story that I relate to, Sarah, uh, from whatever goofy experiences I've had over the years. Now, the hard thing with now doing this as a video, obviously, will be the bird, the dog, but also that it will be me actually looking at the camera and not the screen where I can see myself. And oh no, oh no, Jojo. Oh no, what's he doing? He's gonna plop down. You gonna plop down? I'm sorry. I gotta watch the dog now. What a good boy. Um, he's just. Oh my God! It's that. Oh, he's just back there, just loafed. Oh no! It's the classic conundrum that if there's an animal on screen, all eyes are on the animal, not on the actors. So good luck not forgetting that there is a little dog just back there constantly. Anyway, and of course keep looking at the screen. Um, okay, so for I guess like a year, yeah, about a year, maybe a little bit less. I lived at this house. I lived in a house for a year in my life. So I had a friend who, where I'm from, Ventura. It's like a coastal city. Below it is Oxnard, and then below that's Port Hueneme, Point Mugu, the naval base. Below that is Malibu, on the way to LA. And then above Ventura, you would go inland towards Ojai. And before you reach that point, there was just this long stretch of road that had a few houses, not a lot, just old tract housing, probably from the late 40s, early 50s. I'm assuming that they thought that area of Ventura would develop more, but it was right next to a riverbed. If I remember correctly, that area had oil in it, and so that curtailed, I think, any development north. All Ventura's development went in other directions, and so all these houses ended up in kind of it was a toss-up. They're nice houses, but they're not that close to amenities, and you have to go along this area called the Avenue, which was the rundown part of Ventura, where all the violent crime happened. But so my friend's, his name's Brandon, which if you listen to the first story, you probably would have heard me mention him briefly. He's a big guy, 6'4", maybe, 350 pounds, beard, big, large man. Anyway, so Brandon's grandmother lived in a house up in Ojai, kind of a classic tract house where, big living room, big backyard, medium-sized backyard, 3 bedrooms, 2 bath with 2 full showers. Big kitchen. I'm trying to remember everything, the layout of the house, because it's been a while. Anyway, so Brandon's grandmother eventually, his family moved inland into a small town that used to be a mining town. There wasn't a whole lot there. Anyway, so Brandon's family moved inland. His grandmother stayed in that house. He stayed with her to kind of look after her, and he didn't want to leave Ventura, where all of his friends were and stuff like that. And he had reasons to hang out. he his grandmother eventually passed away, uh, and Brandon functionally became a caretaker for the property. So like until they could figure out what to do with um, the sale of the house and then divvying up the money from the sale of the house and how that fit with the will, and a big kerfuffle like happened with his like family um, over like who got what, as as is often the case with wills and testaments. Brandon, in the meantime, would be responsible for the property, and I want to say he might have been like somewhat unemployed at the time, but I can't really remember. I was employed. I was a security guard up at a insurance company. Uh, and so I was being paid pretty all right. And I basically was like, originally I was living with my family, and then Brandon's grandmother died, and he needed somebody at the house basically to help pay for bills and things like that. And I figured, hey, why the fuck not? Brandon's a good friend of mine. We'll hang out all the time, like have like good food, like reasonably party, since like we weren't huge partiers. Um, and so I moved into like this one room, and basically I knew nothing about the house itself except that before I moved in, another friend of ours named Mike, who'd previously been a coworker of mine at another place, he'd lived there, and his thing was he's like, oh man, he's like, you're living there, like he's like, he goes, that's a trip. He's like, I got out of there. He goes, basically, he's like, the day before I left, he's like, I got woken up at like 6 a.m. by a rooster, like like calling like outside the window. He goes, first time that ever happened. And he goes, and I go out in the front to like head to work, and there's a goat on the front lawn. He goes, I'm a good Catholic, so he's like, my first thought is clearly the devil is here, and I need to like get out of this house. He's like, he described, get this, I don't entirely like, I don't know. Mike had like, this isn't the same Mike from the previous story, but Mike had like, oh no, he described how like one night doing the dishes there, like he was like doing dishes in the window in the kitchen where the sink was. You look like straight out onto the front driveway out onto the street. And he's like, he said he was doing dishes, and as he was like working on them, he looked up and just saw like a black shape move across like basically what would be through the flower bed. He also described seeing shapes like in the evening, like just black shapes down like the extended distance of the hallway. And he would kind of like glance up and like see him, and then like he'd like go and like lean around the corner, like get a double like look at him, and they'd be gone. So you know, I didn't see any of that per se. I remember one night sleeping in the living room before I moved in. I remember sleeping in the living room, I think back when his grandmother was still alive. And as I'm like laying there, like we were going to go to Disneyland the next day, like it was like me, him, like 3 or 4 other people, had this big group going. And as I'm like laying there, like trying to sleep on the couch, there was a birthday card, one of the like ones that plays music, like over on a end table across the room. And all of a sudden, as I'm like laying there, it proceeds to start playing its like music, and I'm just like it's very silent. I'm just like laying on the couch, just like I'm like okay, that's fine. It's just doing its thing now, and then it would stop. And you go, like a while would pass, and all of a sudden you'd hear it kind of like creak open a little bit, and then start playing again. Just like I'm like, it's fine, everything's fine. Let's say it was a ghost. So what? no one's ever died. I'll just be on this couch and it'll just be creepy and it'll be fine. It'll be fine. Morning's only in 6 hours. It's cool. It's fine. I'll go to Disneyland. I'll have a great time and it won't be a big deal. So I try not to think about that too much when I moved in, let alone the fact that I already agreed to move in by the time that Logan told me, like, effectively, like, Mike had a ton of, like, weird ghost stories and experiences and, like, quirky stuff that had happened to him. And this was, like, when I said I was moving in, it was after, like, I'd already made that decision when he's like, oh, man, he's like, I couldn't get out of that place fast enough. That place is cursed. So, and for a good while there, I had a great time in the house. Brandon and I, chuckleheads, we would have running airsoft gun fights through the house, up to and including one night that involved, in our attempt to, like, beat the other one, Brandon was holed up in a basically makeshift couch fort, like, down the hallway. I'd, like, overturned an empty, like, bookcase down at the other end of the door, other end of the hallway, and, like, made, like, a barricade. And then, like, towards the end, after this standoff, like, I finally, like, kind of, like, trained, like, what was it? I had, like, a little pistol, and then I had this, like, he gave me, like, this, like, M16 that didn't work very well, but was very powerful. Like, its aim was really bad. Its clip didn't really work very well, so you kind of had to manually load it. But it had, like, a lot of punch. Whereas Brandon, like, he's basically, like, he was working at a pizza place, I think, and he would end up, like, he knew this guy that would basically show up with just, like, a trunk full of airsoft guns that, like, presumably fell off the back of a truck, and they were all, like, cost nothing. So he'd be all like, hey, I got another, like, armful of, like, airsoft guns. This one's motorized. This one's gas powered. But so I end up shooting out the light over him in a lucky shot, raining hot glass down on him in his entrenched position, and plunging the whole house into darkness, and then using that as the impetus to get, like, out from behind my barricade, head for the kitchen, and then like, basically it turned into us both moving as slowly and silently as we could around the house until we end up with, like, Brandon had, like, a knife on me, I had, like, my gun in his, like, mouth, basically, and, like, we'd gotten, like, knocked over, like, a table, and then we called it a draw, and then we spent, after that point, like, every night or so, we'd all of a sudden be all, like, sitting around the table, and then we'd just, like, dive for the closest gun and, like, point it at the other one, and we had just this running nonstop standoff going for, like, the year that I was there. So good times. We had a blast. And there wasn't anything inherently, like, creepy, because Brandon was always around. Like, there was never really times when Brandon wasn't physically in the house. So, like, it wasn't like I was going to be there and he'd be gone, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, what's going on in here? So Brandon had a room down at the far end of the hallway on the left side. I had a choice between two different rooms. I opted for the one that was kind of like the furthest from Brandon, so, like, Brandon's over here, and I went for the closer to the two rooms, which was smaller. And I moved in there and took, like, there was 3 beds in the house, or 4 beds, and so I took one bed that was in there and, like, moved it in. And it was already all covered up. It already had sheets and stuff like that on it. I just, like, put a big inflatable mattress on top and then, like, put my own, like, sheets on top of that and slept on that. I have a penchant for flags, historical flags. You could probably already guess that just by knowing me. And so I I tacked them all to the walls and whatnot, and since the majority of them were like old, like historical pirate flags, it meant that the room was effectively wallpapered in like near complete black with like skulls all over the goddamn place. But you know, I didn't pay attention. I had a little desk, like this little itty bitty desk that like my laptop would sit on, and I'd plink away on that, and you know, I'd go in the living room, play games on the Xbox they had in there, and so on and so forth. It's had like a PlayStation 2. That's where I beat Shadow of the Colossus. Was at his house. I remember like at the end fighting so hard to, you know, like change the ending, and like Brandon's just staying there watching me, kind of like distressed. Just he's like, give it up, man. He's like, it's the end. You can't beat this. And I'm just like, there's no guarantee. You don't know. Have you beaten? He's like, no. I'm just like, well, maybe I can win. Maybe I can like save my like ostensibly like girlfriend, maybe sister, or like I don't know. Love that game. Anyway, but so, you know, everything was going along super great, super well. Nothing weird happened until one night. You know, when the lights would go out in the house, when we turn them off. Anyway, it's not like they just go out. When we turn off the lights, it would be dark, like pitch black in that room, because we were out in the middle of nowhere, like we're away from Ventura. We're not in Ojai, and Ojai wasn't very big. It was kind of like Anthony Hopkins hangs out there. So that tells you what kind of like, it's not super wealthy or ritzy. It's in the woods, dry woods in Southern California. There's always forest fires. It's just that the rich can afford to go and live in these like secluded ranches, and then there's just tons of itinerant poor who are living in trailers because it's not near anything, and it's the only place they can survive. It's full of Nazis, too. Like, the place is fucking crawling with white supremacists just, like, fucking everywhere. Anyway. Oh, yeah, man. Yeah, no, on the way up to Ojai, you'd be driving along, and if you looked out the, like, window to your right on the way up, there is literally like a concrete, like a brick wall that was enclosing a compound with this house that was had a massive flagpole that was flying the first Confederate national flag and the stars and bars. And you're like, okay, this is the neighborhood. This is what Ojai's like. Oh, and Anthony Hopkins is down there. They're having a film festival. Oh, by the way, the Klan meets down the road. Anyway, so at night when you go to bed, it would be dark, and it didn't help that I also had completely covered the walls and ceilings with pirate flags, which were also all black, so it was very dark. But so towards the end of my stay there, one night I meandered my way into my bedroom, and I laid down and I went to sleep, like you do. And I had a dream. Every once in a while, blue moon, I'll have just like a dream that it's unique, or it's different than a regular dream. It's like more clear, more concise, like more going on. It's more memorable and seems to make more sense and is less like quirky and whatnot. So in this case, the dream was very memorable, but for like really terrible reasons. I basically was in Ventura. Like I was in a perfect representation of downtown, like Main Street Ventura. I was just walking along it, and basically what ended up happening was it was like a dream Ventura Silent Hill. So as I'm in this dream Ventura, I end up like there's klaxons that all of a sudden go off, and then fucking it turns into Silent Hill. Very much in the Silent Hill 2 theme, very stylized, kind of like more after that. Though the klaxon thing, clearly I must have picked up from the film. But all I know is that, like, yeah, all of a sudden, like, I'm in a Silent Hill Ventura. It's just perfectly rendered, like, and instead of like the main street, it becomes just like this long, like, chain link, like just path with like big chasms and these like rooms and just things, and you're being pursued, and like, oh, it was awful. And then like all of a sudden, like, it would stop, like you'd go into a room or you'd go through something, and all of a sudden, like, bam, you'd be back in Ventura, and you'd be in Ventura, you'd be in the shop that you would be in that spot, and you would be able to look around at the merchandise, you'd be able to go back and like go down the street. It wasn't like where you like, oh, I'm going down to the mall in this dream, and then you get there, you're just like, I don't remember there being a Quiznos where the Sparrows was, or like, oh, weird, I didn't realize the White House was attached to the mall, but I guess it's there now. No, this was Ventura. But so this goes on for what feels like a long time. Like I'm in this like Silent Hill for a while, and eventually I wake up. I wake up to my pitch black, completely dark room, and I'm laying there. And as I'm laying there, I realize I hear something in the room, beside the bed, just kind of shuffling around in circles. Just like the sound of kind of something just dragging itself in a steady like movement, a circle just around the floor, just a shuffling sound just keeps going around and around and around. And I keep my eyes shut. I mean, not that it would help. Basically, the minute I opened them, it was pitch black, and I began to realize that I felt that there was something there, and I'd close them back up again. And you just hear the sound just scooting around the floor next to the bed, just on and on. And I'm just like laying there, just like, I'm like, oh shit, like, oh no, what is going on? I'm like, it's finally happened. It's finally, like, this has finally come, like, the day has come. Like, the horrible things that, like, Mike was saying were going to, like, come and get me. I'm like, they've come. It's here now. I'm laying there in, like, absolute terror when all of a sudden I wake up. Turns out that I'd woken up from the nightmare into another nightmare. Except the sound hadn't left. The sound was still going. It was still in the room, still next to the bed, and it kept inching around, and it would stop sometimes. And then it would kind of scoot towards the end of the bed, and then would come out, and it would scoot down real close to the side of the bed, and I'm just laying there, eyes shut, unmoving. Like, I woke up on my back, which I don't usually sleep on, but, like, all of a sudden I'm just, like, laying there, eyes shut, just, like, trying not to move, not make any sound, not breathe, just whatever it is, I don't want it to notice me. I'm hiding basically in plain sight in this pitch black room that I cannot see anything in. So I just lay there. And I lay there for hours. I lay there for hours, just quietly, just like waiting, like my eyes like partially like open, just kind of like waiting for the darkness to recede. And then finally, the very first hints of light begin to creep into the room, and it suddenly becomes possible to actually see where I'm at. And that's when the sound stops. And I just laid there, just for a little while, not long. But I laid there as the light crept up. Basically what happened was that the sound stopped when the light first started to come into the room. But I stayed motionless, waiting to make sure that nothing made any more sound for like probably another half hour. Eventually, a rooster called outside, which I did not think of as being unusual. Like, you're in the middle of nowhere. Like, you're kind of, like, in places where you would expect to keep, like, a chicken for, like, the eggs and stuff like that. So, like, why not? But yeah, no, man. Yeah, no, it was just awful. Like, I was terrified. and this was like in addition to like one night I like went to sleep and woke up into what I thought was my room in my family's place. Like I woke up and the environment and just like the positioning of the bed and everything felt wrong, like it was at the other house. And when I'd like look around, I could kind of see like everything from my old room. And I'm just like where the hell was I? Like how the hell did I get here? And then all of a sudden I wake up again and be like, wait a minute, I'm not in the house at all. I'm not back at Brandon's. Okay. But yeah, no, that night was scary as shit. Like just horrible. Well, come to find out, I was just like, I'm like, oh man, and Brandon, I had a rough night. He's like, oh yeah. He goes, well, what's up? I'm like, I just had like this fucked up nightmare, and I didn't go into detail because usually I'll anything that happens, I will reserve for later. I'll have it happen. I'll basically just say like, oh man, I had a nightmare, and I'll leave it at that, and then I'll come back to it once the person, if they have any information that they like want to like express or share, I'll get it from them before I give them like what happened. I'll just be like, I had a nightmare. Oh, it was a rough sleep, and they'll be like, oh yeah, well, maybe it's this, and they'll give me information. I'm like, well, funny you should say that because here's what happened. So in this case, Brandon explained that he'd been basically running a test on me since I got there to see how long, or whether at all anything would happen, because I had picked the room that his grandmother had died in, and when given the option, I picked the bed she died in. Whoops-a-doodle. That's on me. I should have asked. I didn't even think. I just assumed she died in the living room because that's where I always saw her. But no, she died in that room, in the bed. Well, not in the bed. She apparently was half in, out, half out of the bed when she died. So he's like, oh man, I was waiting. He's like, I gave you the dead lady bed. I didn't tell you because I wanted to see whether anything weird would happen if you spent enough time. And I'm like, well, the increase in nightmares that I've been having in this house has been very distinct. I'm like, a big uptick from what it used to be. So, I'd say that is definitely something to keep in mind. But yeah, oh man. I did not live there for very long after that. That was like, I think the last 2 or 3 days that I was there, and then I moved out. And it wasn't because of that. We were just like, that the time was up, we were done. We actually ended up filming a movie there. Brandon, amateur filmmaker that he was, wanted to make like a zombie comedy movie, and so we ended up making this like weird one with like me, him, and all of our friends and whatnot, all centered around this house. And it was fun. It was goofy. It was a good experience. But yeah, no, man, that night fucked me up. Like, it was so scary because you're just laying there, you're hearing this thing dragging itself around, then you come to find out, like, oh no, you're just in the bed somebody died in. And if Brandon's to be believed, the bed was inherited from a woman across the street who also died in it. So, the fact that I'm even here, who knows? Maybe in an alternate reality, I'm dead in that bed. We don't know. Anyway, so that is the second ghost story and the second account of something spectacular that happened to me in my life. So hopefully you'll enjoy that story. It'll be potentially spine-tingling. I feel as though my delivery is never entirely good for really emphasizing just how horrible and disquieting a lot of these experiences are. But, whatever. It is what it is. Anyway, hope you have a good day, or morning, evening, whatever you're doing. And I guess I'll talk to you soonish. Maybe even right now while you're watching it. Who knows? Time's funky. Anyway, ciao.